Welcome to the Scientific Worldview, the podcast dedicated to exploring the big questions in science and philosophy. I am Daniel Gambacorda.
I'm Tana Shannon.
Tana, last episode we talked about moral psychology of moral decision making. How do people think about right and wrong? Let's continue down that path. Let's keep talking moral psychology and begin with a dilemma.
Let's do it.
All right. Imagine the following scenario. Julie and Mark are brother and sister. They are traveling together in France on summer vacation from college. One night, they're staying alone in a cabin near the beach. They decide that it would be interesting and fun if they tried making love. At the very least, it would be a new experience for each of them. Julie was already taking birth control pills, but Mark uses a condom too, just to be safe. They both enjoy making love, but they decide not to do it again. They keep that night as a special secret, which makes them feel even closer to each other. What do you think about that? Was it okay for them to make love?
That feels icky. Yes and no, I guess, is my answer. It's like technically no harm, no foul, but also the implications that could come from that, like further down the line, just like general feelings later on. Does that make sense?
All right, go on. Like, what do you mean by the implications?
Like, it can start with that one experience, but then later, they get married and there's tension in their lives because they are harboring these romantic feelings of closeness with their siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can disrupt their lives in other ways that are not just tied to like that one night and that one physical event.
I guess any kind of romantic encounter might affect some later romance, right?
Yeah.
Falling in love with somebody today and then you marry somebody else 10 years from now, maybe the person you fell in love with today, like that relationship somehow affects your marriage down the line. Like that's a possibility, right?
Right. And then especially, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you mention that it was like both of their first time?
No.
Or was that okay? Well, if it had been, that would also impact things.
Okay.
Because I think that's like impactful to your psyche and how you interact with people in the same way intimately later.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, just focusing on the scenario as written. Atana, is it right or wrong? You talked about like maybe it would affect some future relationship, but of course any like current relationship could affect a future relationship, and we wouldn't say like don't have sex with anybody because it might affect something 10 years later, right?
Right. Uh this is this is hard. I'm gonna say it was okay
Okay, so
because
you take the pro incest side.
I guess I'll take the pro incest side.
Okay, but go on. Go on.
Because like they weren't doing anything that could result in inbreeding.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was no harm, therefore it was okay.
Yes, technically, even though it hurts my soul.
Okay. When most people hear about this scenario, it's presented to them, they say it's wrong. But it's interesting if you then ask them, why is it wrong? They'll say something like, well, if a brother and a sister have a child, won't the child be at greater risk for like genetic diseases? And then you say, oh, but it says right in the scenario they use two forms of birth control, so that's not really a big concern. And then they'll say, oh, but it's going to ruin their reputation because other people will find out about it. So it's wrong because it's doing harm to them via their reputation. Then you say, well, Right in the scenario, it said that they decided to keep it a secret. So that's not really a valid concern. And then they'll say, oh, but it's going to ruin Julie and Mark's relationship with each other. That's why it's wrong. And then you point out that they both enjoyed it. It made them feel even closer to each other. It says that right in the scenario. And then they'll say something like, I don't know, it's just wrong.
That's kind of how I feel while recognizing everything that was written.
This phenomenon is known as moral dumbfounding, confusion experienced by individuals when they find no rational arguments to justify their moral intuition. People hear about this Julian Mark case, it's gross. They're like, it's wrong. But if you make them come up with reasons why, some people will give nonsense reasons. They'll give reasons that are contradicted in the scenario itself, which is not to say that it's impossible to come up with an argument for why what they did is wrong, but this is something that has been studied. People will give these nonsense justifications that are contradicted by the scenario.
Right. It does. It feels just like instinctually wrong.
It feels instinctually wrong. And when people have to justify it, they will give arguments that couldn't have been the real reason why they judged it to be wrong.
Right. Like kind of confabulating.
Yes, they're confabulating. All right, here's another one. A man goes to the supermarket once a week and buys a dead chicken. But before cooking the chicken, he has sexual intercourse with it. Then he cooks it and eats it. What is your view?
Icky.
Is that is that okay? Is it morally wrong?
I mean, it's his chicken. It's just a little unsanitary.
Okay, okay. But you would say it's not wrong.
I mean, no. Technically, it's his chicken if he's the only person that ate the chicken.
Yes,
I'm very
yes.
do whatever you're gonna do, but like
Uh-huh.
maybe it's needs to be washed in between activities.
Okay, okay. So it seems like you do think this is disgusting, but not wrong.
Yeah, I don't think that it's like there's not like a moral implication there for me. It's just icky.
Okay.
Please don't do that.
This emotion of disgust plays an important role in moral psychology. In both of these cases, people feel disgust, and that directly informs their moral judgment.
Right.
This is also a factor in people's judgments towards homosexuality and the permissibility of selling organs. Some people think it's disgusting, and that causes their moral judgment.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can understand how it plays into like just this visceral feeling of ickiness
Yeah.
plays into my judgment.
The broader point made by research into moral dumbfounding is people are not hyper rational when it comes to moral judgment. Most people don't study moral philosophy and then, judiciously apply moral principles whenever some moral dilemma arises. Rather, somebody's faced with a moral dilemma, they immediately have some kind of gut feeling about it, and that dictates to them what is right and wrong. It's this like fast emotional process.
Right. It's like instantaneous or basically.
It's fast at the very least.
All right. I'll take it.
And if you force them to, they will make up a logical sounding reason for their moral judgment, but that's not what actually motivated the judgment.
Right.
So you ask people, why is the incest case wrong? And they're like, oh, because of like health problems in the child. And that can't be the real reason why they judged it to be wrong.
Right.
All right, let's talk about empathy. Empathy is feeling what someone else is feeling. I'm not going to use the term to mean kindness or just being nice. It's literally feeling what someone's feeling. So If you see someone crying and it makes you sad, or somebody does something embarrassing and then they look embarrassed and you feel embarrassed for them, that is empathy.
Right.
The prevailing meme is that the world needs more empathy. Only we had more empathy, the world would be a better place. And I dare say this is a myth.
What?
It's a myth.
Why?
I'm going to myth bust this.
Myth busted.
Empathy can just as easily motivate good behavior as bad behavior.
True.
Let's dive into some data.
Okay.
There was a study in which participants are told about a girl named Sherry. She has a fatal disease. She's on a waiting list for a treatment that would improve her quality of life. Participants are told they're going to listen to an interview with Sherry. There's two conditions. In one condition, participants are told, as you listen to the interview, try to be objective, be detached, listen to what she's saying, but just focus on the facts. Basically, don't empathize with her. And the other condition, participants are told, try to empathize with Sherry, try to feel what she's feeling. After listening to the interview, participants are asked, if you could, would you move Sherry to the front of that waiting list so that she gets the treatment before other children, even though that is going to preclude some other child from getting it and maybe they deserve it more. Maybe they were on the waiting list longer. Now, from a purely rational standpoint, there's no particular reason to bump Sherry to the front of the line. You just happen to listen to an interview with her. That doesn't seem like a good reason to bump her to the front of the line. And indeed, participants in that first condition where they're told to remain objective, most of them do not bump Sherry to the front of the line. But in the second condition where they're told to empathize with Sherry, now most of them do bump her to the front of the line. And you could
Are
argue
you
this is
bumping
bad.
her?
Am I bumping her?
Mm-hmm.
Heck no. It's not fair. Why would I bump her to the front in front of some other kid? Why?
You don't morally empathize with her?
Even if you empathize with her, had you been able to hear that other kid's story who's now at the front of the line, it would probably emotionally move you just as much, right?
This is true. Yeah.
So you could argue that empathy in this case is causing people to behave in a way that is unfair.
Yes. Agree.
Another example would be the identifiable victim effect. In one study, participants were told about a child dying of a disease. And they're told there is a drug that can cure the disease, but we'd have to raise $300,000 to produce the drug. They were then asked how much they'd be willing to donate to help save this child. They're also given a picture of the child, they're given the child's name and age. In a second condition of the study, participants were told that there were 8 children dying from a disease, and we need $300,000 to produce the drug that would cure all of them. And they're given pictures of these children with their names and ages. And they're asked, how much would you be willing to donate? 'Twas found people were willing to donate more to save the life of one child compared to what they were willing to donate to save the lives of 8 children.
Really, that's surprising because I feel like 8 is still a small enough number as opposed to all of the millions of people that could have the disease.
That is a good argument, but I guess the response is apparently not.
I mean, it makes sense theoretically, but I'm surprised by the number 8 because that still feels like,
Yeah, it's small enough that you could empathize with them.
yeah, it feels individual enough.
Well, just to lay it out clearly, seems obvious that it's better to save 8 kids than one, right?
That's also true. Yeah.
And yet, people donate less to save 8 compared to one.
Hmm.
And the going theory is this is because a single life is identifiable, it's easier to empathize with compared to a group of people. So the single child evokes empathy in you more strongly. You feel for them more, so you feel more motivated to donate.
And you see that method in a lot of commercials and stuff too, where people will show you, this one poor child in Africa that
Hmm.
you can donate to. And I think they do like a thing where you quote unquote can adopt like this tiger in India who's
Hmm.
suffering from habitat loss. And we need to raise this much money to restore their habitat.
Yeah, those are good examples. And suffice it to say, you could argue this is an example of empathy leading us astray.
Like
Does it
the Sarah
really make
McLachlan
sense? Yeah. Sound of the angel.
with the crying dogs.
Yes. But does it make sense to donate more to save one life than eight? You can argue that it doesn't, and that this is driven by empathy. So empathy is leading us astray.
Right.
When it comes to politics, empathy can be mobilized to recruit support for both sides of an issue. You see this in immigration policy. People who favor increasing immigration will show you videos of suffering immigrants. And they want you to empathize with these immigrants to make you more amenable to letting them enter the country. By that same token, people who do not want to increase immigration will show you videos of Americans who have been victimized by immigrants, people who are victims of immigrant crime. And then they try to get you to empathize with these American victims to convince you to be anti immigration.
The politics behind it all. It's all running on psychology, moral psychology.
So it seems like empathy, it's a tool in the toolkit.
Right.
It's not just if we cranked empathy up to 11, everything would be better. Next, let's talk about altruism. We discussed altruism previously from an evolutionary perspective. Let's take a different tack. First, how do people behave in emergencies? Are people helpful in emergencies? Do people intervene to help others when they see someone else in danger? I'll tell you about a study. This study analyzed tons of security camera footage from the Netherlands, South Africa, and the UK. And they specifically looked at instances where there was clearly an emergency going on, like there's a robbery, an assault, someone stuck on train tracks. They analyzed whether or not a bystander intervened. Does somebody come in to help? And they found that in these cases where there clearly is an emergency, a bystander intervened 90% of the time. So this is not that 90% of bystanders intervened, but if you have some like group of bystanders, there's a 90% chance that at least one of them will help.
A lot higher than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Thought it would be like 50-50.
Well, it seems like if it is a bona fide emergency, usually somebody will step in to help.
That's good. That
Yeah.
makes me happy.
But when someone is uncertain whether or not they are in an emergency situation, we see a very different pattern of behavior. When people are uncertain, they look to others to see how they should behave. And if no one else is treating it like an emergency, people will default to just copying that behavior. It was a 1968 study. Researchers pumped smoke into a room where participants were filling out questionnaires. If it is just one participant, they're alone, smoke pours into the room, 75% of the time, they leave the room. Okay, that makes sense.
Only 75%.
Yeah, you think it would be even higher, right? But all right. At least the vast majority are leaving the room, which is the wise thing to do. But if it was a group of 3 participants, now they only left the room 38% of the time.
Oh my goodness.
And if, in another condition, you have a participant with 2 Confederates who are actors, and the Confederates are instructed to ignore the smoke. Then the participant only leaves the room 10% of the time.
Wow. You guys don't value your life enough.
Yes. But in this case, when there's uncertainty, it seems like people don't want to overreact and they'll just default to conforming. They want to look around and see what other people are doing. So
Yeah.
if you have a group of 3 participants and they're all uncertain, then the first thing they do is look around and see what is everybody else doing. But everybody else is also playing this strategy of I'm going to look around and not do anything.
Hmm.
So from each person's perspective, they see everyone else not reacting. And then
Makes sense.
they're conforming to this like non-reactance.
Right.
When we discussed altruism previously from an evolutionary perspective, we talked about functional explanations of altruism. We discussed kin selection. We talked about reciprocal altruism. These are theories that are meant to answer the why question. What is the function of altruism? Not just how does it work mechanically, but why are people altruistic? And I want to offer one more functional theory of altruism:
Ooh, what's that?
the theory of conspicuous compassion.
What do you mean?
I mean that people are altruistic in order to signal desirable qualities to others.
Okay.
And this signaling has direct fitness benefits like acquiring mates and allies.
So altruism is like a form of fitness?
It's a form of showing off that can enhance fitness.
Okay. Makes sense.
And it's meant to be analogous to conspicuous consumption, which is you buy really expensive stuff and you show off the expensive stuff. People see it and they reason you must be a very wealthy person because only a wealthy person would have wasted so much money on this expensive stuff.
Right. What did you call it? Conspicuous compassion?
Conspicuous compassion.
I like it. Is that a coined phrase yet?
It is.
I like it.
Okay. I'll pass along your praise.
All right.
Before we get to evidence for this theory, let's do a little thought experiment.
Okay, let's hear it.
A house is burning and a woman is outside. She's like, my babies are inside. And a man comes running and then he goes into the burning house. He finds the crib. There's 2 babies in the crib. And he scoops up one of the babies and he runs out and gives the baby to the woman. And the woman's like, oh, thank you. But what about the other baby? And the man says, well, to save one life is to save the world. I mean,
What?
I think I'm pretty heroic for what I just did. I think a thank you is in order. Now, you might agree that what the man did was heroic, but if you were right there and you could have just as easily scooped up both babies, it is strange and perhaps even monstrous to have left one baby behind.
Yeah, why didn't you get both babies? Your job's not done. Go back, go get the other baby.
All right, so you agree that given that he could have so easily just scooped up both babies, that only saving one, although laudable, it's still kind of weird and monstrous that he only chose to save one.
Right? Did you choose the preferable baby? What happened?
Okay. So here I'm just trying to establish that most people would agree helping is good. Helping more is better than helping less. And if you can easily help more, then perhaps you should. And maybe it's kind of strange if you just choose not to.
Yes.
Okay. Now let's turn to the evidence for conspicuous compassion. First, consider that people engaging in altruism often don't care that much about their total impact. You might naively think the point of altruism is to help people. So the altruist is going to care a whole lot about how much they are helping. And maybe put forward some kind of effort to help more rather than less. Consider the case of a doctor. This doctor gives up some work time to instead work at a soup kitchen for the homeless. Ostensibly, the purpose of working in the soup kitchen is to help people. Now, a doctor could be making something like $100 an hour. If a doctor works at a soup kitchen for 4 hours instead of going to work, that means they're giving up on $400. If the doctor instead went to work as usual, they could take that $400 that they make, donate it to the soup kitchen. They can have literally 10 times as much impact because you can pay somebody's salary to work there for an entire week with $400. So, if the doctor's primary altruistic concern is helping the homeless through the soup kitchen, donating money would be a much better strategy than giving up work time to volunteer at the soup kitchen.
It would be the most effective, but would it be the most impactful on your spirit, on your soul?
Right. That's the point. This doctor's not optimizing for impact, not optimizing for
Right.
helping as much as they could.
He's not an effective altruist.
Right. So this doctor is satisfied to save one baby when they could have saved two.
Just go get the other baby, man.
One way that people are altruistic is through donating to charity. Charities vary a lot in terms of how impactful they are. Some charities are very good, some are very bad. One charity might save one life per $30,000 donated, another saves 10 lives per $30,000 donated. So if you're donating to a charity in order to save lives, you might think that most people would do some amount of research to investigate which charities are the most effective. In fact, only 3% of donors do comparative research to figure out which are the best nonprofits to give to. And that kind of research really isn't hard. If you Googled the question, what are the best charities, you would find GiveWell. GiveWell is a research organization. They've already put in the legwork. They've examined tons of charities. They could give you recommendations based on, their data in terms of impact. So it wouldn't even be that difficult to do the research to figure out which charities are best, but people just don't care that much.
I was thinking as you were saying that, I don't know if I've ever heard of that organization or that website. And I feel like that's something that was never even really discussed in school whenever we went was like giving to charities and how to give to charities or what a charity even was.
Mm-hmm.
But we were all working for our own like specific charities because we had to do community service for somebody. So I think that's just so interesting that we were required to do it, but then the research was like put into what we were doing and for who.
There's a lot of things that you don't know about, and then maybe you like Google it.
Yeah.
So if you're like, I don't know how good these charities are, then you can like look it up.
Now that the Google exists.
But only 3% of people do that. So people are quite happy to save one life. Maybe they could have saved 10, but they're not going to spend an hour doing research just to save 9 lives. Come on.
I think too, once people have heard of a specific charity, they get it in their head. And then that's like, once they see an advertisement for a specific charity, they have that in their head as the only charity available to donate to. Maybe they don't know about other charities too. You could also Google that. All of my problems here could be fixed by Google, is what I'm learning today.
But I think that's true. Somebody might just have a favorite charity.
Yeah.
Like
Like you hear of one.
Yeah, like this is the one I always donate to.
Yeah.
But our main point that we're driving at here is if we thought the point of the charity was to help people, you'd expect people to try to help more rather than less, like save 2 babies instead of one. But that
Yeah.
doesn't seem like it's their only or main concern when donating to charity.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Another line of evidence for conspicuous compassion comes from the fact that people donate more when their donation is highly visible. When door-to-door solicitors ask for donations, people give more when there's two solicitors compared to when there's just one.
Interesting.
People give more when the solicitor can see their donation compared to when it's tucked away in an envelope.
I think I relate to that too. I gave to a charity the other day. I only gave like $5, but he did it over Venmo, which was my first time giving to a charity over Venmo. And he made it so my donation was public. So on Venmo, you have a feed and you can see
Mm-hmm.
transactions and labels that people have put on their transactions, not the dollar amount, but so and so paid so and so for groceries. And so you could see on my feed, and my feed is usually private. So I thought that was interesting that that one was public because I didn't have control over it.
Yeah, charities know that donors want their donation to be publicized. So a donor might get like their name on a plaque, and then, people will see the plaque. A charity might have a website with a list of all the donors. Charities host conspicuous events. So, like, this is a charity race, this is a walkathon, charity ball, benefit concert. So, this is a place you go to it, people see you, they know you're great because you're involved in the charity. You take some pictures, you put it on social media. Now all the world can bask in your glory.
Yeah, I've done the walkathons before too.
Okay. Charities have social media campaigns. Do you remember the Ice Bucket Challenge?
Yeah, for ALS.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was based on this concept. If you can make a video and it's going to be popular, and as part of the video, you talk about your generosity in donating to this charity, people are quite happy to participate.
I don't remember the trend super well because I was in middle school. That was when I first got the internet. I was a
Okay.
little baby.
But you just like douse yourself in ice water
Oh,
and
okay.
and you put it on YouTube.
I remember the like dousing yourself in ice water and like they're like telling somebody else they have to
Yes.
do it
Yeah, yeah.
next. Yeah.
And then that makes it go viral.
And what was is ALS, but can you clarify what ALS is?
It's Lou Gehrig's disease.
Okay. Thank you.
Charities will give donors swag. So you get, a pin, a tote bag, wristband, something like that. And now in your daily life, people know that you donated to that charity.
Is it swag or is it merch now?
That's a good question what the distinction is. I think if it's free, it's swag.
Okay.
Maybe if you buy it, it's merchandise.
I'm inclined to agree with you.
Okay. It's always a good inclination to have.
Sometimes, most of the time.
And if you've ever donated blood, sometimes you get a sticker. It's same idea. Because you donate blood,
Right.
that's a generous thing. You get the sticker, and people like the sticker because you want the world to know that you are a generous blood donor.
Right. You can also get a tax break for if you donate to charity, right?
Sure.
I don't know if there's limitations on that.
Yeah, there's a limit.
Like you have to donate so much to get a tax break.
Well, the amount that you donate can be written off. So in addition to like other write-offs that you have, it could exceed the standard deduction, and then you could ultimately pay less in taxes. But there's a limit to how much how much of your donation can be written off.
Okay.
But in general, you're not going to make money by giving away money. You
Yeah.
can get a write-off and maybe that'll reduce your taxes a bit, but you're not going to like make money on net by donating.
Right.
And this is actually a myth. This is something that people will say about whatever like rich person they hate. So it's like, oh, Mark Zuckerberg donated $50 million. He's doing that for tax purposes. And it seems like they don't understand that you can't make money by donating. Like he's losing the money. Maybe he's gaining a little bit in terms of paying less taxes. I don't even know. But speaking of Zuckerberg, he in fact donated $75 million to a San Francisco hospital.
Thanks,
And
Zuckerberg.
what?
Thanks, Zuckerberg.
Yes. Thank you, Zuck. We salute you.
We salute you.
And now it's called the Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital and Trauma Center. So they changed the name. They didn't have to change
Hate
the
his
name,
name.
but I would guess he wanted the name changed, and that was part of the deal.
They
So
did that in Albuquerque too. I'm sorry, I
oh
didn't
yeah,
mean to interrupt you. Yeah, they tried to change the pit to the Wise Pies Arena, which is like
okay,
a pizzeria.
uh-huh, yeah. I think you told me
For
about this.
Yeah, nobody calls it Wise Pies Arenas. It's the pit.
Okay. So Zuckerberg donates 75 million. He wants credit for the generosity. He wants his name in the name of the hospital. And I won't say that's a terrible thing. Hey, if you donate $75 million, you save a bunch of lives, and the hospital is fine with changing their name. I think that's fine. But point should be made. He wanted credit, right?
Right.
He wanted a little bit of credit for that donation.
I feel like a lot of the buildings on college campuses are also named after people,
Hmm.
probably for the same or similar reasons.
We might think that somebody decides they want to be altruistic. They seek out some effective way of helping others. Maybe somebody decides they want to donate to charity. They go looking for a good charity. This is not at all how charity actually works. People mostly donate in response to peer pressure. 95% of donations are given in response to a solicitation. So it's not that people decide, I want to do good. I will go seek out the best way to do good. It's more like they are asked, and for, some combination of social reasons, they end up giving.
Right. It's like they ask you at the cash register too, a lot of the time, if you want to give such and such percent or round up your change
Hmm.
to give to a charity.
And people are especially altruistic when they want to impress potential mates. People, especially men, are more likely to give money when the solicitor is an attractive member of the opposite sex. And men give more to charity when nearby observers are female rather than male.
Trying to look good.
Trying to look good. So that is our evidence for conspicuous compassion, that a function of altruism is to show off things about yourself. It's a way of showing off.
Yeah, I think that holds water.
Now, I want to address a confusion that comes up when people think about altruism. Some people will come across functional explanations of altruism and they will conclude altruism doesn't really exist. If altruism is serving some kind of function, then it's not real altruism. And to this, I would say there's a difference between explaining and explaining away. We live in a naturalistic universe. Everything can be explained. So the fact that you can explain something doesn't mean that it's not real or authentic or genuine. If someone thinks that altruism is only real if it emerges from the magic of your soul, then they have to reckon with the fact that there is no magic and there is no soul. So their understanding of altruism must be mistaken. If a parent is kind and loving to their child, it's not fake kindness just because we can explain why parents tend to be kind to their children. So kin selection, it's a useful theory for understanding parental love, but the fact that we have a functional theory doesn't mean that it's not real love. And in the same way, people are altruistic. And yes, we're going to be able to explain why people are altruistic, but that doesn't mean that it's not real altruism.
I think I participated in that misunderstanding too when I was like in my very first psychology classes learning about the psychology of altruism and evolutionary psychology. I think I also like originally assumed that there was no altruism because everything had a function. Sometimes it still feels that way.
Well, now you know that love is real.
I don't know. You also told me I don't have magic in my soul or magic or a soul. So, like, my
Yeah.
feelings are mixed with you today.
All right. Well, at least those feelings aren't magic.
No, they're chemicals.
All right. Let's move on. Let's talk about political psychology. Let's get political.
I don't know.
We're we're, we're going to focus on the psychology of politics. We're not going to debate political issues.
Okay, good. Because I don't have it in me.
Okay. First up, let's talk about the psychology of voting. Have you ever voted?
Have twice, I think.
And why did you vote?
Once was the election, like the presidential election, and then
Mhm.
once was, I think it was like my state or local elections.
What motivated you to vote? Like, what was the purpose of you voting?
Honestly, this is a little bit silly, but I have like I get emails about my voter status versus other people's, like how much other people are voting versus how much I'm voting. And then it also breaks it down into my age group. And I just like to vote more than other people do because I'm competitive with my voting. I don't know.
All right, that's interesting. Do you have any thoughts about why you're competitive about voting per se? I mean, there's a million things you could be competitive over. So why be
Yeah,
competitive about voting?
I don't know because I'm not a competitive person, but I think in my high school, I registered to vote because my high school registered us all to vote one day, which was super helpful. Um, but I also was, I think, like pretty heavily impacted by all of the, I went to a very liberal school, all of the teachers talking about young people needing to vote and like there's a lack of younger people in voting situations. And um, I think that like was empowering for me and like made me help, made me think that I can make an impact.
All right, and just to be super clear, it's important that young people vote
Yeah,
because
because there's not enough young
uh-huh,
people
uh-huh, uh-huh.
because our values aren't represented as well.
Okay, okay. So might we say that a reason to vote is to impact the outcome of the election?
Yes.
Okay. That's, I guess, the most simple,
Said,
straightforward reason, right?
I guess I kind of went on a tangent with it. Yeah.
But you want to influence who gets elected.
Yeah.
Okay. And the main reason to influence who gets elected is to influence which policies are implemented. So each
Right.
politician has a policy platform. They say, when I'm elected, I'm going to fight for such and such. Maybe it's lowering taxes or changing education, changing healthcare, a million different things. But you could think of each politician is this package of policies. You vote for the politician who's going to fight for the policies that you like the best.
Right.
That sounds basically correct.
Yeah. For the most part.
There might be other instrumental reasons for voting, like you think that your favorite politician is smarter than the other politicians, so they're going to make better decisions in general, or something like that. But I think it's fair to say the main justification is you want to influence who gets elected, and that's because it's going to affect which policies are implemented.
Yes. And I think you're also probably voting based off of the moral implications that you can give to these policies to tie it back to moral psychology a little, even though that's not what we're discussing. But, um, people look at politicians and their policies with a moral lens. And there's some very polarizing policies that are introduced. They're like, I won't vote for this candidate because of this policy because it's wrong based on this moral standpoint.
Right. One reason to prefer a policy is you think that it is morally good or bad.
Right.
But
And I think
ultimately, yeah, go ahead.
you can also say that about politicians as well.
Sure.
Like this person is not in alignment with my morals.
You might think a politician is smart. I'll vote for the smarter politician. You might think a politician is evil or corrupt. So I'll vote for like the less evil one because I expect better outcomes if the politician is less evil, something like that.
The less evil one instead of the not evil one.
Yeah, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I was just noticing that. Just giving space to that.
So let's keep this theory of voting in mind as we discuss political psychology. This theory that, well, you vote to impact the outcome of the election to impact policy.
Right.
We'll keep this in mind and consider how accurate this theory of voting is. Let's talk about your probability of affecting electoral outcomes. What is your chance of affecting the outcome of a presidential election in the United States? The US, we have two main parties, Democratic Party, the Republican Party. The winner of a presidential election is not decided by who gets the most votes, but who gets the most electoral votes. We see who gets the most votes in each state, and then winning that state gives you a certain number of electoral votes. For your vote to directly affect the outcome, your state would have to be perfectly tied between the Democrat and the Republican, and then your vote breaks the tie. Does that make sense so far? Let's just think about New Mexico and there's a Democrat, Republican. If the Democrat is winning by 5 votes and you vote for the Democrat, it doesn't matter. They would have won anyway, right?
Yes.
And if you vote for the Republican, well, now the Democrats are still winning by 4 votes. So Republicans are going to lose anyway. So there has to be, you know, a tie or one away or so. There has to be very little difference in the vote count between the two sides for your vote to make a difference.
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay. So you got to break the tie with your vote. And then the fact that your favored candidate got your state's electoral votes has to be what caused them to get elected, that they would have lost without it. So, for example, if you're going to vote Democrat, maybe you vote in New Mexico for the Democrat, you break the tie, your candidate wins New Mexico. Well, it could be that they would have won even without New Mexico. So the fact that you broke the tie didn't matter. And it also could happen that your candidate gets New Mexico, they lose, and they would have lost regardless of getting New Mexico.
Right.
Okay. So for your vote to matter, let us say, there has to be a perfect tie in New Mexico. You break the tie, and then the fact that you broke the tie is what causes your candidate to get enough electoral votes to win.
Right.
Okay. As you might imagine, the probability that you cast the deciding vote in a presidential election is quite small. What is the chance that there's a perfect tie and you break the tie and then that decides the outcome of the election? Well, we don't have to philosophize. Statisticians have been working on it. And on average, it's somewhere around 1 in 60 million. Now, the particular probability depends a lot on what state you live in. So if you are in a state that is decidedly not a swing state like New York, your chance of deciding the election with your vote is something like 1 in 10 billion. Because New York is going to go Democrat, no matter what. So voting in New York is incredibly unlikely to swing the election.
But there's always a chance.
Yeah, 1 in 10 billion chance.
But what if everyone didn't vote? Then what would happen?
That's true, but your decision to vote doesn't causally affect other people voting.
But what if only the old, dumb, stinky people choose to vote? Then what's gonna happen?
Then you're going to get the stinky politician.
You guys, young people, let's vote for
The
not
only
stinky people.
The only thing that you can control is whether you vote. Now, if you want to be an activist, maybe you could swing a couple votes. But even if you swung 100 votes or 1,000 votes, it's still incredibly unlikely that that would have made the difference. The probability of dying in a car crash if you drive 2 miles is 1 in 45 million. So for many people, the chance of dying in a car crash as they drive to the polls is greater than the chance that their vote is going to affect the outcome of the election.
Wow. That's that's an interesting fact. I'm going to think about that when I'm going to drive to vote because I'm going to vote like a cool kid.
Now, of course, most people aren't aware of the particular probability that their vote's going to decide an election. But I do think people have an awareness that the odds are not great. I mean, people are aware that whether or not they vote, it's not going to decide who gets elected in practice. If we imagine someone who is sick on election day, they're so sick they have to stay home. Are they laying in bed thinking, wow, this has altered the course of history? Me not voting has changed the destiny of the United States.
They might be if they're having some illusions of rationality.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Even if most people don't know the probability, they know that it's very unlikely their vote is going to swing the election. Can we agree on that?
We can.
Okay.
Yes.
So if we imagine people are voting in order to have some effect on policy, we would have to accept people are voting even though they only have a 0.0000002% chance of actually affecting policy.
Percent too? That just makes it worse.
Now, the fact that anyone's probability of deciding the election with their vote is very small is not itself a knockdown argument against voting. To decide whether or not to vote, you'd have to do an expected value calculation where you take the probability of deciding the election and multiply that by the utility of your candidate getting elected instead of their opponent. And it's plausible that for some people, that would outweigh the costs associated with voting. So I'm not arguing that nobody should vote, but I don't think that most people are doing an expected value calculation either, nor are they even thinking in expected value terms. I don't think most people are like, well, my chance is 1 in many millions, but the benefit to the country is so vast if my vote does decide the election. So even though it's a small probability, it's still worth doing. I don't think that's a common thought process. That being said, the fact that your chance of swinging the election is so small, and I think most people are not thinking in terms of expected value. This is a challenge to the idea that people vote in order to affect policy.
Yes.
All right. Next, let's talk about how do people decide what to vote for? People mostly don't vote their self-interest. This is a common myth. Some examples. Parents of children in public school are not more supportive of government aid to schools than other citizens. Young men subject to the draft are not more opposed to military escalation than men too old to be drafted. People who lack health insurance are not more likely to support government-issued health insurance than people covered by health insurance. And an especially common myth is the idea that one party or the other is like the party for the rich. Actually, the correlation between wealth and ideology is very low. So you can find some examples of people's votes aligning with their self-interest, but overall the connection is pretty weak.
That's interesting because I would think that people would vote within their self-interest, but also I think I was holding in mind like very controversial topics that were very clearly in someone's interest or not,
Mhm.
rather than schools.
That might still be the case. People are voting in order to affect policy, maybe not out of their self interest, but maybe they're doing so altruistically. They're doing what they think is best for the country or best for the world.
Yeah.
It's a possibility. We'll keep it in mind. Next, what determines which policies people prefer? In the US, we got two major parties, the Republicans, the Democrats. There's this very strange phenomenon whereby if you know somebody's position on one issue, you have a pretty good chance of predicting their position on other issues, even if those issues are totally unrelated. For example, if you know somebody's view on abortion, you have a good chance of predicting their view on climate change, which is strange because abortion and climate change are very different. I don't see any deep philosophical reason why your view on one of these would correlate with your view on the other. Likewise, if you know someone's view of immigration, you have a good chance of predicting their views on healthcare. You know somebody's views on gun policy, you can use that to predict their views on the economy. This is all pretty weird.
Hmm. That's interesting correlations.
Why are these all connected?
I don't know. It feels like they're connected because of the value base. Like these ideas are grouped into categories. Um, and if you subscribe with one ideology in one category, you're more likely to subscribe the same. So, for instance, if you are a Democrat, and you subscribe more to pro-choice ideals, you could be more aligned with more climate change activism because that is a group of characteristics that is expected in the US.
Yeah, I think that's basically right. These views are connected because people are affiliated with a political party and the party represents a package of views.
Right, exactly.
You identify with a party maybe because of one issue or some very small number of issues. And then you just kind of default to agreeing with the party on other issues. And
Right.
we could call this a conformity effect of sorts.
Especially when you're hearing things during election season that are pro specific position on specific topic.
So maybe you have a very strong view on abortion, and because of that, you always vote Democrat. And if you're asked about the economy, you will express standard views of the Democratic Party, but this isn't because you independently came to these views, rather, you're just conforming to the views of the party.
Yeah, I think that can be the case in sometimes, especially if you're also like not super knowledgeable on the topic,
Hmm.
like space travel or something. I don't think that's in
Yeah.
politics, but just as an example, if some Canada is looking into nationalizing space travel for all US citizens, you have a strong point.
That'd be fun.
Would you go into space?
Yeah, sure.
I might try it once. I don't know. I might get motion sickness. I don't like planes.
Well, I'll tell you what, people's policy preferences are easily swayed by information regarding whether the policy is endorsed by Democrats or Republicans.
That sounded like a tongue twister for you. People's policy preferences.
People's policy preferences, people's policy preferences. You got to say that before you go on stage. There was a study. People read articles that were supposedly from a newspaper. The article talked about a welfare policy that was very generous. In the experiment, the researchers varied whether the policy was endorsed by Republicans or Democrats. In one version of the article, it said that the policy is endorsed by 95% of House Democrats. In the other version, the article said policy is endorsed by 95% of House Republicans. Exact same policy, they just changed who supposedly endorsed the policy. Researchers had participants rate the degree to which they favor or oppose the policy, and they looked at the interaction between the ideology of the participant and whether the policy was endorsed by Democrats or Republicans. The results were very clear. If a policy is described as being endorsed by Democrats, liberal participants will favor it. Conservative participants will oppose it. And symmetrically, if the policy is described as being endorsed by Republicans, conservative participants will favor it. Liberal participants will oppose it, even though it's the same policy.
I feel like, yeah, when you affiliate it with a specific party, I think it has more connotations in it after that, no matter what policy it is.
People are conforming to the views of their party.
Yeah.
And in this study, they asked participants whether the endorsement by the Democrats or Republicans affected their opinion. People said it had little effect. So we know it had a big, we know it had a big effect. And either they're being dishonest or they're not even aware.
They're liars.
Now, as you mentioned before, if somebody cares a lot about an issue, they know a lot about an issue, they wouldn't be so easily swayed by knowing what party endorses what. But if it's an issue they haven't thought a lot about, it seems like people are pretty quick to conform to whatever their party endorses.
No space travel.
I like space travel.
There's your two parties. Space travel, no space travel.
Pro space. Next, let's talk about how people choose which politician to vote for. In practice, people are strongly influenced by the party of the politician. If you always voted Democrat in the past, it's very likely you're going to vote for whoever the Democrat is this time around. People are influenced by the politician's policy platform, but there are other features that people seem to care about in a politician. One such feature is height. The vast majority of U.S. presidents have been tall, taller than average. And taller candidates are more likely to receive the majority of the popular vote.
How tall is tall?
In the study that I looked at, they compared presidents to the average height of an Army serviceman, which does change over time. But presidents are taller than the average Army serviceman.
That's a weird comparison, but okay.
Well, average height changed over time, so you got to compare it to something.
Yeah, I guess. Why not just average height of population?
Well,
I don't know.
Given that our presidents have been male,
okay,
you wouldn't want to compare it to the population average height, right? You'd probably want to compare it to men at the very least.
Yeah.
And I guess they had data on the average height of men in the military.
Of course, yeah. It just feels so hyper specific.
Sure.
Sorry.
Another feature is attractiveness. There was a study. People rated the attractiveness of politicians from past elections in Finland. And the people doing the ratings were not from Finland, so, they've never seen these people. They compared the attractiveness ratings to electoral outcomes, who actually won these elections, and they found better-looking politicians were more likely to win.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Another factor is voice pitch. In a study, researchers recorded men and women saying, "I urge you to vote for me this November." They then used software to make a version of the recording that was slightly higher pitched and a version that was slightly lower pitched. They then would play a pair of these recordings for a participant, the high-pitched and the low-pitched version, and ask them, if they were running against each other in an election, which voice would you vote for? And most people pick the lower-pitched voice. It's true for male participants and female participants, true for male candidates and female candidates. People prefer the lower-pitched voice.
It's authoritative.
Turning to real-life data, there was a study in which researchers analyzed the voice pitch of candidates running for the U.S. House of Representatives in 2012. And they found the winning candidates had lower voice pitch on average compared to the losing candidates. And this is true for both male and female candidates.
That's interesting. I wonder why.
Yeah, maybe it's what you said, more powerful, authoritative.
Maybe.
Now, all this data is correlational. I'm not going to claim that this is super strong evidence, but I don't seriously doubt the fact that these superficial characteristics make a difference.
Right.
That being tall and good looking, it probably does help a politician's electability.
I feel like we've had some pretty ugly presidents, though.
I won't deny it.
They're all a bit old, too, for my
Sure.
taste.
Yes. Sure. But you just need to be better than the other politician, I suppose.
I guess so. Who was it in our history that was like notoriously a very good looking president?
I don't know.
I think it was Kennedy.
Okay.
I think like that was like a big thing,
Okay.
but I wasn't alive. So I couldn't tell you.
There could be a rational justification for taking these superficial characteristics into account. You want your leader to look powerful and competent. If nothing else, you want other countries to perceive that the US has a strong and competent leader, and how your leader looks and sounds is part of that. But it also seems pretty obvious that the policies candidates will implement are a lot more important than whether they're average looking or good looking.
I would hope so.
Like, president influences whether we go to war, president decides whether we launch a nuclear weapon. So
They have an important job.
yeah, whether or not they have a deep voice, that should be given very little weight.
But he should be tall, dark, and handsome every time.
I mean, why not? Next, let's consider, what do people know about politics? If people are voting in order to make it more likely that particular policies are implemented, you might think they would have some sense of how politics works and what the government is doing. They apparently have some opinion regarding how the government is run, so surely they must know something about the government. Now, before we dive into the data, I want to say that the world is complex. Most people are ignorant about most things, and there's nothing wrong with that. For example, I drive a car, but I couldn't tell you exactly how a car works. I know I have to push the pedal to make it go. But even though I drive a car all the time, I'm not an expert in cars. I can't fix a car. I'm ignorant about cars. Most people are ignorant about most things. Consistent with this, most people are ignorant about politics. To support this contention, I have many pieces of data. Here we go. Most Americans don't know which party controls Congress. During election years, most Americans cannot identify any congressional candidates in their district. Only 34% of Americans can name the three branches of government. The executive, legislative, judicial. 73% of Americans don't know what the Cold War was about. More than 25% of Americans don't know which country the U.S. fought in the Revolutionary War. 40% of Americans don't know who the U.S. fought in World War II. More than 50% of Americans believe the Constitution established English as the national language. 26% of Americans believe the purpose of the Constitution was to declare independence from England. Notably, there was a different document that did that.
Do you know what it's called?
There's a different document where they declared independence.
Was it a declaration by chance?
It was a declaration of sorts, yes.
Yeah, maybe of independence.
Perhaps. Okay, how about very recent history? During the 2012 election, most Americans did not know that the economy grew the year before. During the 2000 election, most Americans didn't know that crime decreased in the 90s. The crime went way down in the 90s. Likewise, they didn't know that federal spending on the poor had increased in the 90s. And these are facts that you think would be useful when deciding who to vote for, because it would help inform which policies would be best. You would think that for a democracy to work, at the very least, people have to know what policies candidates support. You have to know, if I vote for this candidate, one thing will happen. If I vote for the other candidate, something else will happen. Well, during the 2000 election, that was Gore versus Bush, Americans were asked which candidate favored which policies. Most Americans wrongly believed that Bush was more supportive of abortion rights, welfare state programs, and environmental regulation. So people were performing worse than chance at knowing what policies presidential candidates were advocating.
I was just being born in 2000.
I lay no blame on you for this.
Not my fault, guys.
50% of Americans think immigration is increasing crime rates. In fact, in the United States, immigrants commit crimes at a lower rate than natives. And Americans have no clue how the US government spends money. Americans estimate that foreign aid takes up 25% of the federal budget. The actual amount is less than 1%. Americans underestimate how much is spent on defense and welfare. We spend a ton of money on defense and welfare. So people are wildly ignorant about politics, and it would be quite difficult to get a good understanding of politics and policy. For example, to have an informed opinion about economic policy, you would have to study economics. I mean, there's just no way around it. So it would be difficult and time consuming for most people to become experts in politics and policy. And we can ask, what would the benefit even be? Let's say a randomly selected person decides to spend hundreds of hours becoming an expert in politics. What is the payoff?
Lobbying for what you
Lobbying.
want, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, you could vote in a more informed way.
Could lobby for things.
You could write a letter to your congressman and your letter will be better written.
Yeah. I think that's the only, you'll be more informed.
Yeah.
In general. I think that's just a benefit in itself.
So you'll vote in a more informed way. When that next presidential election comes around, you got your 1 in 60 million chance of affecting the outcome. Suffice it to say, the selfish payoff to being a more informed voter is extremely small. I mean, you could spend hundreds of hours becoming highly informed, but the benefit that you are getting is very, very small. So we may say that people are rationally ignorant. They are ignorant about politics, but it's rational for them to be ignorant. It's just not worth it for most people to become political experts. They're better off spending their time doing something else. In much the same way, I am rationally ignorant about cars. I could spend hundreds of hours becoming an expert in cars, but what's the payoff? I'd rather spend those hundreds of hours doing something else. In the same way, people could become political experts, but they have better things to do.
I have many better things to do.
Sure.
Than become a political expert.
All right, now let's turn back to the question of voting. Why do people vote? We've been considering the idea people vote in order to get their favored policies implemented. Ultimately, that's the reason why they vote. We've discussed several bodies of evidence that should make us skeptical of this theory. First, people have a very low chance of affecting the outcome of a major election. And even if you could justify voting based on an expected value calculation, I don't think most people are thinking in those terms. Second, Most people don't vote their self-interest, but it's not clear that they're voting altruistically either. I mean, if you're voting to improve the world, wouldn't you know more about politics? I mean, wouldn't you try to learn about what's going on?
Ideally.
Third, people's policy preferences are to some extent just incoherent. You can sway what policy they endorse just by associating the policy with one political party or the other. Fourth, people's votes are affected by superficial features that shouldn't matter that much, like height and voice pitch. And fifth, people are deeply ignorant about politics. And if people are voting in order to have an effect on the world, you might expect them to know something about what's going on. So I'm not going to claim that nobody votes in order to influence policy, but this doesn't seem like the main driving factor.
Right.
And if people aren't voting in order to influence policy, why are they voting?
I don't know. Why are they voting?
I think we should discuss this question on the next episode of The Scientific Worldview.